Shalom, my bitches. It's the finale of When Deathworlders Meet by Andrew's second account. Pew, 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 yeah!
The three of them then ran at a dead sprint, up the next spiraling ramp, and into a long hallway very similar to the one below. Along each side were rooms stacked with bunks and lockers. Personal effects were evident, along with what might have been game pieces or playing cards on tables. So far, they had been lucky. Or the crewman had been lucky. He wasn't sure which at this point. None of them seemed to be occupied. That changed when they made their way into a large open section. It looked like some sort of large multi-purpose room, with tables and chairs of all varieties in evidence, along with holo-projectors, vid-screens, and quite a few other pieces of equipment whose functions he could only guess at. The room looked like it could have been used for almost anything, from dining to entertainment, to relaxing, to exercising, to anything else a crewman a long way from home might want. At the moment, there sat three groups of around a half-dozen crewmen, each lounging on what looked like old Roman cline. He might have let them live had they not moved a muscle, but no, not after he noticed they were being served and serviced by at least a dozen slaves. A calmness came over him, and he gave a mental shrug. Maybe Aranis was right. It certainly didn't take much for him to stop seeing these creatures as people. He raised his rifle to a chorus of wide-eyed shouts, whoops, and screams from all present. They began preparing to scatter like roaches. "No one move!" he bellowed, and everyone in the room froze in place. He scanned the room, ready to punch neat little superheated holes in anyone who even looked like they might try to go for their weapons or resist. By all rights, he should have started shooting well before he opened his mouth. That would have been the tactically sound approach. But no, he had something better in mind for this scum. He turned to the NASA jumpsuit-clad woman at his side. She was at least as angry as he was at this point. Maybe more so, chivalry being what it was. He had an idea not to use Aranis so much as harness her into providing something so much more deserving than a simple death. "My lady," he said, "my delicate masculine sensibilities have been gravely offended. Would you mind me killing everyone who is presently sitting in one of those chairs?" "Gladly, my gentleman," she replied with a snarl. He could see her preparing to pounce in the corner of his eye, when one of the slavers, looking from Stephen to Aranis and back again, decided to beg for his life. Apparently it had heard what he said. "Wait!" the creature shouted, pushing a slave off its lap. He stood and addressed Aranis. "I'm male too, and you wouldn't hurt an unarmed man, would you?" "I might," she responded. Stephen could tell she was genuinely mulling it over. He knew she was used to killing in the heat of battle, or in desperation. But this was something different, even if deserved. Add to it the fairly obvious fact that her society, and more than likely her entire species, was deeply matriarchal, and these sorts of executions posed somewhat of a challenge to her culture and training. "Fine," said Stephen, pointing his rifle at the creature's head. "I'll do it." "Single combat!" the thing shouted, his hands moving to cover his face from the inevitable plasma bolt. "I demand to face my attacker in single combat. No weapons, me and him." He heard Aranis let a small puff of air escape her lips. He doubted there was much she could say to that. Would she think less of him if he just shot this slaver? Probably. On the other hand, the thing looked like it was something out of a horror film on stilts. He couldn't even begin to count the number of legs. His choices were either to try and impress a violent alien super-predator by fighting a living nightmare twice his height, or to chicken out and shoot the damn thing. Ginto must have known his hesitation meant that he was actually considering doing anything other than putting a hole in the crewman's thorax from a safe distance. "Don't be stupid, you stupid," she said. "We don't have time for this! Just shoot them all and let's go!" Stephen handed his rifle to the doctor. "If anyone tries to interfere or make a run for it, then you use this," he said. She took the weapon and held it deftly. Stephen stepped to Aranis and pulled the young woman in for a hug. He felt her chest expand and contract with a sigh. "Be safe," she whispered. He leaned in, giving her cheek a quick little lick. "For luck," he said. For a moment, she seemed stunned, not knowing what to say. She appeared to shrug. As if to stretch, she first brought herself up to her full height on the very pads of her feet, standing maybe 10 centimeters taller than Stephen, then lowered herself down to his eye level. Leaning in, she held him tight and licked him firmly and square across the lips. "For luck," she said, letting him go. Stephen turned to face the nightmare spider crab crewman and started walking. "You can do it, my gentleman," called Aranis as Stephen stalked his way up to the massive monstrosity. "I believe in you." "Idiots, the both of you! Such unnecessary drama," she said, shaking her head in disgust. "Getting yourselves worked up over nothing when we should be heading for the command deck. Stephen's just going to tear him in half anyway." He heard both of his companions' votes of confidence, and felt his chest swell with pride. He would need every bit of it. He wasn't sure this was a good idea. He should just grab Aranis and run. But no. Here he was, risking everyone's life because it was supposedly the right thing to do. At least all the slaves were escaping, so it was a win at the end of the day. As he approached the looming spider crab beast, he began considering his plan of attack. Should he make a grab for one of the legs, or try to dodge them? Should he keep his distance and remain mobile, or close the distance and grapple? Was the thing venomous? How strong was it? How fast was it? "Come at me, creature," said the spider crab crewman. "Class 12. Ha! Suck my ovipositor." "Wait a minute," said Stephen. "Ovipositor? You're not a—" The thing swiped at Stephen with a long pincer, and the man had an answer to the question of speed. Not very fast at all. He dodged easily, lunging forward beneath the creature so its central body loomed above him, and jumped into an uppercut. That's when the world went black as it slammed down onto him, with the multi-limbed creature now pressing down, blocking his senses, and both of them sprawled out on the deck together. A bout of hysterical arachnophobia struck Stephen. He lashed out with both hands and feet, swinging madly as he tried to force the spindly crewman off him. He barely registered that everything around him had begun to get warm and slimy, and his opponent had indeed started its retreat as he hoped, albeit one piece at a time. Finally, he managed to find his footing beneath him, staggering and gasping. "Where is it?" he demanded of no one in particular. "All around you, you lunatic," said the doctor. "Honestly, you're the most deadly being in the known universe that isn't human. Whether you want to admit it to yourself or not, you could have just slapped it to death." Stephen was soaked from head to toe in alien gore, from a being that had been talking to him not 5 seconds ago. His thermal underwear had offered approximately zero protection from alien guts. Looking down at his feet, he could see that if anything, the doctor had understated his abilities. The spider thing wasn't torn in half so much as so much lumped into an odd collection of piles. He felt like throwing up. "He tried his best," scolded Aranis. "These monsters are scary. There's no shame in that." Stephen wiped blood and chichen fragments from his eyes. He noticed Ginta cradling his rifle expertly. Thinking perhaps having more weapons was better than not, he reached for one that was next to where the crab spider had been lounging. "Fuck this. No more single combat. Keep that gun, Doc. Things might get hairy." Just as he lifted the lightweight weapon into his hands, the room went mad. Apparently, telling the crewmen he and his friend were going to kill them all was a great way to make sure none of them stayed put long enough for him to actually make that happen. He sighed internally. He hadn't wanted to take prisoners, certainly not after seeing how they were using the slaves, but he also wanted to put a good face on humanity after all this mess came to light. That meant he probably shouldn't kill those who were willing to surrender. As for those who opted to flee, Though a little distasteful, shooting a retreating combatant in the back wasn't a war crime. They could be reasonably expected to return to fight otherwise, more likely with a greater tactical advantage. "Slavers! You run, you die!" he shouted at the top of his lungs. "You surrender, you live!" It went without saying that if they fought back, they would probably also die. "Harry, take the ones running. I'll shoot the ones going for weapons," he called, hoping she would remember which ones were slaves and which ones were slavers. "Ginta, help me lay down some cover fire. Don't shoot near our girl." Aranis, for her part, didn't even notice as Stephen cut down with hot plasma the ones trying to shoot at her. She simply kept slicing into the bodies crowding the far doorway. In his adrenaline-fueled hyper-aware state, he wondered why on earth most of the ones behind cover would risk being gunned down by Ginta and himself in order to shoot at Aranis, who was busily fixated on tearing her way through those trying to flee. He could probably guess. She was meters from those hunkered down, far closer to them than Stephen, and while he and Ginta were just another pair of combatants, she was so much more, knee-deep in the remains of the fleeing crewmen. Already down to the last few, she seemed like a dark, shifting mass of terror, made of lightning-quick teeth and claws, a roaring demon from nightmares made real. To them, Stephen was just a small mortal with a gun. But her? She was a dark angel of death, ascended from the depths of hell itself. It irked Stephen that they thought so little of him as they shot yet another through the side of the head. It also scared him a little. If he couldn't pin these guys down because they weren't bothered to pay attention to the man shooting a weapon at them, it put his partner at serious risk. In what at this point was a truly unsurprising amount of time, the entire matter became moot. After decapitating the last of the remaining crewmen, Aranis spared not a single instant before leaping on the first of a trio of slavers who had neither attempted to flee, surrender, nor been shot by Stephen. In the light gravity, the young woman launched like a rocket from the doorway, giving the lieutenant colonel and the doctor precious little notice to shift their fire away so as not to commit fratricide. In as many seconds, Aranis had leapt to each of the three crewmen, having neatly sliced through their largest and mostly centered areas of mass, in one case practically bisecting him, or her, all the way through. Stephen guessed at this point her speed wasn't so much due to the trained efficiency of a killer, but more by the fact that she had stopped taking the time to eat. She probably had her fill, and just wasn't hungry anymore, judging by the slight bulge of her previously lean tummy, evident even beneath his flight suit.
"Fine, good, we're done here,"
said Ginta, trotting to the doorway at the end of the room, Stephen in tow. She pointed back the way they had come and spoke loudly.
"Escape pods are that way. If you are alive, you should consider yourself free to get the hell off the ship before you die with the rest of—"
"Shit, let's get going!" Stephen had felt the slight and disquieting breeze of cold air in this spaceship. A moment later, he heard the hissing. He broke into a run, and headed for the last ramp that would take them to the command deck. His accomplices just behind. "He may have been holding out hope that the firefight would have stopped us." Not enough time! Ginta, can we block these vents?"
"No," said the doctor. "Not all of them. The air will be long gone before we finish sealing the vents on this deck, let alone every deck. We'd need to do that because the captain will have locked every door open, as sure as he'd have locked the command deck closed."
As if he needed some proof of her words, the trio rounded the curving ramp only to run face first into a completely sealed doorway. Seeing no way to lift or pry the smooth white surface, nothing in the way of a handle or anything else to grab onto, Stephen settled for banging on it. "What about we just head to one of the escape pods?" he asked. "What are the chances we survive?" Ginta made a gesture that Stephen's translator meant negative.
"Even if we made it there without suffocating," she said quickly, "we can't leave the slavers in command of the Harvester. They'll just collect the floating pods and tow them to their home system, or shoot them out of the void, whichever."
"Fine, we bust the door."
"Stephen,"
said Ginta, grabbing his shoulder and rubbing a thumb over his collarbone.
You're strong, but this is a waste of time. We need a better plan. It's an interior space door. It only needs to withstand 15 psi 20 tops. It's not just me doing the kicking, he said, returning the gesture by pressing his hand onto hers and rubbing his thumb over the muscles there. You're stronger than you know, Ginta. You kicked someone's head off just a pair of minutes ago, and carried Aranis like a warhorse riding into battle. I think between the three of us we can do this. She looked livid, almost like he defended her. Damn you to hell, Stephen. We will talk about this later. But that does not mean we can do this. Time is running out, shouted Aranis, grabbing the doctor by the head and turning the other woman to face her. She stared daggers into her eyes. You will help us like an ancestor's damned beast of burden and kick down that door, or I will tear your heart out and let your soul rot adrift amongst the open stars for all eternity. Stephen placed a gentle hand on the back of the enraged woman's neck and coaxed her to one side of the door, pointing at it. Aranis nodded. He stood in the middle of the doorway before nodding to Ginta. You're on that side, where I think it probably latches. I can't aim with two hooves, she said. Hitting that man in the head was just a lucky shot. Then use one, he said. Ready? Now! Stephen and Aranis fell flat on their faces, each trying to grab a hold of the other to brace their fall. They both ended up on the ground in an ungangly tangle of the other's limbs, with Stephen wondering just what in the hell had happened. Neither of their kicks had made contact with anything, he was sure of it. Looking around, he realized they were both lying on the floor of the command deck, just across the entranceway they had been on the opposite side of an instant ago. The door itself was nowhere to be seen, leaving him to conclude that it had slid into a recess and admitted them. Ginta, having the benefit of owning a total of 4 legs, and using only one of them to kick, remained standing. She gave them the equivalent of a shrug as he and Aranis delicately untangled themselves from each other and got to their feet. You were going to break down the door anyway, called the captain. Even Stephen could tell from the man's natural voice that he had to be somewhere on the expansive deck as opposed to speaking from a distant location via intercom. I'm unarmed, said the captain, stepping out from behind one of the command consoles. Stephen trained his weapon on him, as did Ginta. The captain held his hands spread wide apart, empty palms facing forward. Even if that had been the universal gesture for fuck you, Stephen could still tell the man held nothing at all, dangerous or otherwise. Behind the man, another slaver whom Stephen recognized. Meishi, the executive officer, made his way out from hiding, his tentacles spread wide. He too held nothing in his grasping appendages. You're surrendering? Stephen asked in disbelief. Just like that? The captain made the equivalent of a shrug. You literally tore through my entire crew. Yes. I'm sorry, but I believe this creature is tricking us, said Aranis, bouncing gently on her toes. Stephen wondered what that meant. Nervousness? Indecision? In another context, it might have been cute. If I wanted to kill you all, Anticatoon said, I would have simply opened fire as soon as I opened the hatch, not set up some elaborate trap. I don't know. I don't like this either, Aranis. Stephen saw nothing out of the ordinary, but that could mean nothing. I'm begging you, said the captain. Spare us. We mean you no further harm. The ship is yours now, Captain Human. This is no trick, just a conclusion that being at your mercy will keep us alive longer than shooting at you will. You killed a fully armed crew. You had inside help from a traitorous doctor. You could tear this ship apart with your bare hands, and that is no hyperbole. History has shown that even one Deathworlder aboard a ship will kill everyone, let alone 3. I am merely bowing to the odds. Aranis growled. Stephen could tell she didn't like this turn of developments.
After what she had been through, the temptation to gut him must have been overwhelming, though equally conflicting with her sense of honor. Of course, he wouldn't dream of stopping her if she simply lost control. The lieutenant colonel held his weapon a little tighter, but pointed down to the ground. Aranis had still not made her move. The earlier threats to personally disembowel him and devour his flesh notwithstanding. Ginta, he noticed, had curiously raised her weapon to point at the captain, and she had just flipped the safety off. Whoa! He slapped his hand against the barrel of her rifle, pushing it to the side. It took a surprising amount of force to get her point of aim shifted away from the captain. The doctor began to struggle against Stephen, but made little headway until she began sidestepping into him with her haunches, simply pushing him aside with her bulk. Ginta made a whining, plaintive noise as she continued to try her best to wrestle the weapon back on target.
He knows, Stephen! He must die!
Keeping an eye on Antikatun and Meishi, the lieutenant colonel opted to stop pushing the rifle away, and instead simply pull it free from her grasp and throw it to the side. The two slavers had not made a move for any concealed weapons, or tried to activate any devices or explosives. That had been their best opportunity to spring a trap, and they hadn't done anything. Perhaps he should give them the benefit of the doubt. At the moment, however, he wanted to know just what the hell had gotten into the doctor. And so did Aranis.
"Physician?" she asked. "I agree the warden deserves death, but he's surrendering. To my people, and I think to Stephen's as well, it is considered rude to kill someone in such a circumstance. Only an appointed magistrate or lady may pronounce his death now," said Aranis. She gave Stephen a conspiratorial eye. "Or a ship's captain. Though I am curious, what does he know exactly that you believe he must die for?"
Ginta grunted. Stephen wanted to know the answer to that question as well. He thought back to a few minutes ago, just before he and Aranis had less than gracefully made their entrance onto the command deck. Though he hadn't known her very long at all, that was the only other time he had seen Ginta this upset, almost like a switch had been flipped. It had happened just after he had mentioned how strong she was.
"Deathworlders,"
Stephen said to Antikatun.
"You called us Deathworlders. You also said it before, just after you locked me into that room with Aranis. Is that something significant? A word for races that are stronger than the wet tissue paper the rest of you seem to be made out of?"
"Exactly," said Antikatun. "It's a compliment, really. We would all love to be able to tear someone's head off as easily as opening a beverage, wouldn't we?"
"Ginta doesn't seem to like being called that," said Stephen.
"A spy and a traitor," the former captain gave a shrug equivalent. "Her type doesn't like the truth, doesn't like being found out."
"What do you mean?" asked Stephen. The captain gave a knowing smirk.
"Ask her if she doesn't want to come clean."
"I'm asking you," Stephen growled. Ginta looked like she might charge the man. Aranis kept a hand on the other woman's back, but Stephen had serious reservations about how much good that would do, beyond giving Aranis a very short ride to the middle of a bloodbath. Antikatun made a gesture equivalent to rolling his eyes.
"The veterinarian there isn't from Vree, a Class 3 world. She probably isn't even Shalkoth. She's from a death world like you and Lady Aranis of Karamast. Could also be some kind of engineered soldier, but I doubt it. She hardly seems the type."
"So what?" said Stephen. "Is this some kind of obscure space politics? What does it matter what world she's from? I don't understand."
"Of course you don't," whispered the doctor. "And that's why I like you and Aranis. It doesn't matter to you and your kind, but to the rest of the galaxy, it does. We, the three of us, are from worlds that aren't supposed to harbor sapients. If you ask them, we pose a serious threat to all other life in the galaxy. That is how you're able to tear that Tizratic to pieces, how Aranis is able to kill an entire ship with her bare hands, And how it was, I was able to carry her on my back and kick that man's head off. That's what gave me away, I imagine.
Why would you want to hide that? Stephen asked. It seems like something I would want to let other people know about me. If they knew, they might not have even taken you into slavery. Even as he said it, he realized an obvious conclusion. She wanted to be taken. Or at least it was better than some alternative she faced.
Because, Stephen, the powers that be in this galaxy, as much as they don't like to admit that Deathworlders even exist, have a policy to address us, should they ever find us. 100% quarantine until the race reaches independent extrasolar flight. Then, it's extermination, probably by something as simple as lobbing a few asteroids our way. There is evidence that it has happened before.
Conspiracy theories. Why have plans to destroy species that don't even exist? Yelled the former captain. You're not going to listen to that whack job, are you?
As opposed to an abusive slave trader pleading for his life?
Asked Aranis. Why bother waiting for us to become spacefaring? Asked Stephen, entertaining her suggestion.
Because most races, Deathworlder or not, end up destroying themselves anyway. It's just a byproduct of civilization. All life is competitive, carnivorous or not. Radiological weapons, heat death, pollution, engineered disease, all have killed worlds. Aeons ago, a civilization created a vast satellite swarm that surrounded their sun to produce power, with each political faction producing and controlling their own set. They each ended up weaponizing them. They're still active today, and the planet is mostly an eccentric disk now. Suicide is more convenient than murder, even on a planetary scale.
And your people are spacefaring? Asked Stephen.
Yes, and yours are too now,
said Ginta. That gave him pause. Though it was a natural instinct, he was suddenly very glad he hadn't provided any information to the slavers.
How did the captain know who or what you were? Asked Aranis. He certainly thought I was dangerous, and one can surmise that it did not take him long at all to reach the same conclusion about Stephen. How were you able to hide? And if you were not aware of the greater community of daemons, and these machinations concerning our kind, why did you allow them to take you?
Ginta huffed. Stephen's translator told him that was a sigh.
I might as well tell you in front of them. The captain knows enough now that the wrong people can piece together the rest if he starts talking. I am a Shalkoth, and not engineered either, not artificially anyway.
You colonized the Death World, interrupted Antikatoon.
Shut your face before I remove it,
Aranis shouted back.
When Shalkoths were first leaving Vree millennia ago, we did so in corporate-sponsored generation ships. A few natural disasters, war, shell-made catastrophes, and time meant that more than a few were lost to the homeworld. Garkathoth, my homeworld, is almost as deadly as either of your worlds. We knew of the gravity, atmosphere, and weather before we left Vree, so we had generations to accommodate. But our history tells us that most were lost in the years following landfall. Maybe up to 9 out of every 10 people. But we persevered, and I am the descendant of that lineage.
She shook her head slowly, looking up to the ground. When she spoke again, it was barely a whisper, a hiss of disgust through clenched teeth.
Imagine our surprise when we finally began exploring the stars again, and our investigations on other worlds. Dead worlds. Informed us that our dedication to survive had marked us for extermination. Imagine my surprise when one of our farming outposts were raided by slavers, the fishermen of galactic economy. I played the Varanian rather than expose my civilization to death.
She gestured to the former captain.
That man created a pair of sublight engines to get me. I would have lived like that, forever, a pathetic Varanian slave if I had to. if I couldn't find a way to escape. Then you came. Then they found you, Stephen. Your race had no more time. I couldn't let them do to you what they seemed to do to the other worlds."
"That's why you helped me," said Stephen. "Why you told me what these guys were about back when I was first brought aboard. Thank you."
"And that's why I would do anything to ensure knowledge of my people's existence doesn't fall into the wrong hands. Just knowing a Shelkoth Death World exists would be enough to send people looking for it," she said. "I have to admit, I was a bit disappointed in you, Stephen."
"What? Why?" he asked.
"You're too nice," she said. "I was kind of expecting you to begin a rampage with me a lot sooner and not get tricked into the cargo hold. I needed you to make a move before we made landfall at a slaver outpost, before anyone else might see what you could do and draw some conclusion."
"I was feeling him out. I was gonna escape, but I'm not gonna start a fight just on the word of one person, especially when these guys are so big and..." Stephen paused, scratching the side of his face. "Yeah, I think I just figured out where you're going with this."
"What?"
asked Aranis.
"I feel like I'm missing something important."
"She investigated this, you dumb beast," said Aunt Katoon, gesturing to the Centroid. "She told me Stephen was a Deathworlder, or pointed me in the right direction, which amounts to the same thing. She wanted me to try and kill him. You two should feel betrayed."
"So, you put the gentleman in the dungeon with me and opened my cell. I suppose I should thank you,"
said Aranis with a slight bow at the waist. "As much as I hate being used, you made the right call," said Stephen. "I'm not sure I would have attempted my escape in time. Even if they spaced me then and there, it was the right call."
"Spaced?"
asked Aranis. Stephen had forgotten that many of these concepts were totally new to the young woman, although she was a deceptively quick learner. "Left my body adrift amongst the stars," he clarified.
"And how exactly is that a good decision?"
Aranis asked Ginta with a slight growl and an accusatory stare.
"No ship of his own, no body, no evidence at all. Barely an inkling of where he might have come from," said the doctor. "It would have bought his race time. It's better than Stephen waiting until it's too late to make his move. And it was also the least plausible outcome. Stephen wouldn't be dumb enough to walk into an airlock, and any weapon that would put a hole right through this ship's hull wouldn't permanently injure us. I thought Stephen fighting his way to control of this ship was a very good bet. Getting himself locked in a room with what I took for a vicious predator, no offense, Aranis."
"None taken, physician,"
said the other woman.
"Was very much not part of my plan. I had to improvise, so kudos to you for keeping me on my feet, former Captain Aunt Katoon. So, Stephen, could I please have a weapon so I can kill this pile of shit?"
Stephen spared a glance back to the weapon he had thrown from the woman's hands, then back to the slavers. He licked his lips, mulling it over. Well, that would be one way to handle this situation, but..."
"No, Captain,"
she said, placing a gentle hand on his shoulder, rubbing his collarbone and thumb again.
"It's the only way. It's the only way to keep us, our kind, safe from the galaxy. You must understand that."
He felt a strong discomfort creeping up him. Between this woman's touch, the closeness of her imposing bulk, and the strength he had seen in those legs, he began a mental rundown of whether or not it was a good idea to punch a rampaging horse. "It's possible to imprison them on one of our worlds," Stephen said. "We can inform our peoples of the situation and let them handle it. The abductions occurred in their territory. They have jurisdiction."
"So do you, Captain,"
she whispered, Ginta's hand tightening almost imperceptibly on his shoulder.
"We vote, physician," said Aranis. "Then we abide by the captain's decision."
Ginta turned to the other woman, appearing annoyed.
"Fine,"
she said.
"I vote they stand before a magistrate,"
said Aranis.
I vote kill them,
said Ginta.
And I vote they also stand trial, said Stephen.
So be it,
hissed the doctor.
Stephen handed the weapon to Aranis before marching over to the pair of slavers, grabbing them each by an appendage. They were surprisingly soft. Ship? Stephen asked, looking to one of the speakers embedded in the bulkhead. He had seen the other slavers doing much the same thing before his escape. Do you respond to me now? Yes, Stephen. You are the captain, came the digitized reply. The former captain ceded command to you at 4681.936.62.13 in the afternoon. He dragged the pair to the command desk's airlock and slapped the control for the inner hatch. The former captain began to protest. What are you? He shoved them roughly inside and slapped the control again to shut the door. Ginta looked pleasantly surprised. She had the wrong idea. He just didn't want them to have any clue where they were going until they got there. It was the space equivalent of tossing them into the trunk of a ground car, he imagined. Ship, do not open the inner or outer door to this airlock for anyone but me, he said. Now, can you find the location of my homeworld using the location you found me, the distance I traveled, if provided, and the direction I was traveling relative to the galactic center? Yes, but that will not be necessary, said the ship. I have determined you are from RGT-9873A-3, an uninhabitable Class 12 Death world. All right, set course for...
Wait, Ginta said. I changed my vote.
What? It's too late, said Stephen. And it wouldn't matter anyway.
Yes, it does, and no, it's not, she replied quickly,
pointing to Aranis.
I also want to see them before a magistrate on her world.
Stephen stared at her for a moment, then shrugged. Justice is justice. They have claim too, don't they? Both Ginta and Aranis nodded. Ship, do you know where Aranis' home is? Of course, came the reply. Good. Set course and go, he said, pointing at the view screen. As space warped outside the ship, Aranis moved to stand close. He put an arm around her and felt very gratified when she returned the gesture, kneading her hand into his side.
I'm finally going home, she whispered to him.
Yeah, he whispered back, placing a kiss on the side of her head. He wasn't sure she knew what the gesture meant, but she sure didn't mind. It's our version of affectionate licking, he said.
Thank you, Stephen, she replied, kissing his cheek in return. Hey, Aranis, he whispered. Yeah, she whispered back. What's the penalty for kidnapping one of Her Imperial Majesty's Dame Commanders? He asked. Oh, if they're found guilty, death, she replied. Probably torture first, then definitely a painful death. Lots of torture, though.
He glanced behind him long enough to see Ginta smirking. Stephen felt something large and painful land on his back, knocking the air out of him. It felt like a piece of furniture, or a stack of books, or more likely a wild animal. It kept bouncing against his spine and ribcage, up and down, up and down. Any attempt to move from his prone position brought pain, as sharp claws dug into his skin and fingers curled around his bicep.
Daddy, Daddy, Daddy! Get up, get up, get up!
Claws off the comforter, he growled at the animal. You know that. He felt the sharp points at his back and thighs relent, replaced by bony knees. But the bouncing wouldn't cease, and neither did the prying fingers at his arms. He tried his best to ignore the disturbance, burying his face deeper under his pillow, pulling it tight around his head. But that had been a mistake. It gave the beast something to attack, a weakness to exploit. She began prying at his fingers and pulling at the pillow, all the while still bouncing up and down on his back, trying to beat the life out of him.
Daddy, Daddy, stop playing! It's time to get up! The beast pressed her face to his jaw, prying his pillow up just enough to expose one of his ears. She whispered, I have a surprise for you.
He grunted. Based on the smell alone, he could guess what it was. This would call for drastic measures. He reached slowly to the left, hand sliding carefully between the sheets so as not to arouse suspicion. He would wake the beast's mother. Making contact with the warm body, he shook the creature. She grunted back, "No." He pleaded with the mother of the beast. "Babe." "No, sleep, your daughter." The die had been cast. He would make one last attempt to defeat the beast before all was lost. He rolled over towards the mother of the beast. Whee! Sarah landed with a flump on top of her mother. It had worked! The battle over! Stephen would return to the life of peace he had built for himself since last night in this, his king-sized bed kingdom.
"Nuh-uh, Fluffy Bear. Your daughter wanted you. I think I heard her say that she has a surprise. Probably because she didn't forget what day it was," said the mother of the beast, his wife.
Deftly, Aranis yanked his only protection, his pillow, from his head. She grabbed his beard and turned him to face her, drawing a long lick across his lips before tearing the blankets off of him. All hope was lost. "Of course I didn't forget that it's our 10-year anniversary," he said, returning the lick with a kiss. He had got her a gold and iridian pearl necklace, which he would surprise her with at dinner that evening. He pushed himself to a seated position in the bed, his back against the headboard, with Aranis doing the same.
"If you're going to bring your father a surprise," said his wife, "go get your brother. I think he has one for me."
"But Mom, he can't see in the dark," complained Sarah. "Neither can I," said Stephen. "Go get your sunglasses, then turn on the lights so the men of the house can see what's going on. It won't be much of a surprise if I can't see, right?" "Fine," the little girl huffed. When she had cleared the room, Stephen turned to Aranis. "You had something to do with this, didn't you?"
"Maybe I did, my Fluffy Bear,"
she said as coyly as she could manage. She must have been watching a lot of vids. She was getting better.
"The kids wanted to do something for us this year. You always tell them that damn story of how you, me, and Aunt Kinta all met. Can you blame them for getting excited?"
"No, but does it have to be so early in the morning?" he asked, just as the lights came on. Though it took him a moment to adjust to the light, he noticed Aranis sporting a pair of reflective gold-hued aviators she kept on the nightstand.
"Well, that depends on the surprise," she replied cryptically. "Some surprises are best enjoyed in the morning."
She nodded to the doorway of their bedroom. There stood a young boy, not more than 8 years of age, pale skin and dark hair, just like his father. Unlike his mother, his eyes did not glow at night, but instead appeared as green as grass. "Hey, kiddo, what you got for me?" asked Stephen.
"Nothing, father. This is for the lady of the manor,"
said the boy, carrying what looked like a pile of raw steaks from 6 different animals and as many worlds. He presented the tray to his mother. After he took it onto her lap, she pulled him close and kissed his cheek and ruffled his hair.
"Thank you, Aganon,"
the boy's mother said.
"Such a delightful young gentleman you are."
The boy bowed, looking very proud of himself. "Dad!" Stephen turned to the sound, just as a miniature night beast wearing lime green shorts, a loose rainbow-covered hoodie, and hot pink sunglasses bounded through the bedroom door, claws scrabbling over the hardwood floor, digging in just long enough to give a good launch for a pounce onto her father. Long black hair, though tied into a ponytail, found its way onto his face. Something hard and warm was forced into his chest. "One more thing," said Sarah, excitedly hurrying off her father, Claus still managing to find his calves and comforter in the process. "No peeking!" she called back. Stephen shook his head and looked down at what she had presented him. It was the large plastic cutting board from the kitchen with a metal serving tray over most of it. Something warm was underneath. He reached to lift it.
"No peeking, my gentleman,"
said Aranis. The lady says no peeking, sir, echoed Aganon. He stuck his tongue out at his son. The boy stuck his own tongue back at him, and jammed index fingers up both his nostrils for good measure. Stephen was about to tell him how he might accidentally stab his brains that way, when his daughter tried to kill him for what must have been the third time this morning.
Ah, you're getting big, honey,
he said, rubbing the girl's back. No, you're getting small, she replied, tossing bottles of chocolate syrup, honey, strawberry syrup, and maple syrup onto his lap. Thanks, kiddo, he said. Now, what's this surprise? She lifted the cover off the cutting board. Pancakes! The end. Now, a little note to y'all motherfuckers who probably want me to read pancakes at this point. Probably not going to do anything with sexually explicit material for a long time until I'm willing to break through that hurdle of myself of, allowing my performances to be sexually explicit. We'll see when that is. Suffice it to say, no pancakes except for these. These are good pancakes, acceptable pancakes. Yes, pancakes, eat them good knobs. Anyways, I'm still not done with college. I still have a couple more weeks of my motherfucking thesis to do, with the assumption that my first time defending it is accepted. Ah, fuck me. I really goddamn hope that's the case, because if not, I am so goddamn tired of this fucking bullshit. So close. So fucking close. I even have a job. Ah! Anyways, I'm not fully back. Fucking shit, this took like 3 goddamn hours to record. I am so fucking out of practice. Fuck! Anyways, remember to like, comment, subscribe, hit the little bell notification on the side if you like what I did. And have a nice one, y'alls.